I should have known something was wrong when I found 23 HOA violation notices crammed into my mailbox that Tuesday morning. The envelopes practically burst out when I opened the door, cascading onto my driveway like confetti at the world's worst party. Each one detailed a different supposed infraction about my vehicles, ranging from excessive automotive presence to visual pollution via vehicular accumulation. I kid you not, those were actual phrases typed on official HOA letterhead. As I stood there reading through this mountain of bureaucratic nonsense, I heard the unmistakable clack of sensible pumps on pavement. Karen Whitfield, our HOA president, marched down the street with her clipboard held high like a battle standard. She stopped at each house, photographing every single car with her phone, muttering numbers under her breath. When she reached my property, her face lit up with the kind of joy most people reserve for winning the lottery. "Mr. Johnson," she called out in that syrupy, sweet voice that meant trouble, "I see you haven't addressed the vehicle situation yet." She gestured dramatically at my driveway where my 1992 Mustang sat next to my work truck, while my wife's SUV occupied the third spot. My project car, a 1967 Camaro I was restoring, sat under a proper car cover on the street directly in front of my house. I tried to keep my voice level as I responded, "Karen, every one of my vehicles is legally registered, insured, and parked either on my property or in legal street parking. There's no HOA rule limiting the number of cars a homeowner can have." She smiled, that practice smile of hers, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "Well, we'll just see about that, won't we?" 3 weeks later, I understood exactly what she meant by that threat. The HOA board, under Karen's iron-fisted leadership, had called an emergency meeting to discuss the growing vehicular crisis threatening our community's aesthetic standards. I attended, of course, along with about 40 other confused homeowners who wondered what crisis could possibly require an emergency. Saturday morning gathering, Karen stood at the podium like a general addressing troops before battle. Our community prides itself on maintaining the highest standards of visual appeal. She began clicking through a PowerPoint presentation that featured multiple angles of my cars. However, certain residents have chosen to transform our pristine neighborhood into what can only be described as a used car lot. The presentation continued with photos of my vehicles from every conceivable angle, some clearly taken from her property with a zoom lens. She'd even created graphs showing the dangerous upward trend in vehicle accumulation over the past year. According to her data, the presence of my 4 cars represented a 400% increase in automotive blight since I'd moved in. I raised my hand during the question period. "Karen, I'm a car enthusiast. I restore classic vehicles as a hobby. My work truck is necessary for my job as a contractor. My wife needs her SUV for her real estate business. Every vehicle serves a purpose and is properly maintained. How exactly does this constitute a crisis?" She leaned into the microphone with theatrical concern. "Mr. Johnson, while we certainly appreciate your hobbies, we must consider the impact on property values. What happens when every resident decides they want 4, 5, or even 6 vehicles? Where does it end?" The meeting dragged on for 2 hours, with Karen proposing increasingly draconian measures to limit vehicle ownership. She wanted to cap households at 2 cars maximum, ban all street parking, and require HOA approval for any vehicle purchases. The board, filled with her hand-picked allies, nodded along enthusiastically. Over the following weeks, the harassment intensified. I received daily fines for vehicle infractions that didn't actually violate any existing rules. Karen would photograph my cars at 6 a.m. claiming they'd been abandoned if I hadn't moved them in 24 hours. She called the police twice, reporting suspicious activity around my project car, forcing me to explain to annoyed officers that I owned the vehicle I was working on. The financial pressure mounted as the fines accumulated. $500 for excessive automotive display, $300 for failure to rotate vehicle positions, $750 for dollars contributing to parking scarcity. This despite the fact that our street had plenty of open spaces. My wife started getting nervous about the mounting bills, and I knew I had to find a solution before Karen's vendetta bankrupted us. That's when I discovered something interesting during a late-night research session while reviewing property records and HOA boundaries. I noticed that the large parking lot adjacent to our community, the one everyone used for overflow parking during parties and HOA events wasn't actually owned by the HOA. It belonged to a defunct shopping center development company that had gone bankrupt 3 years earlier. The lot was up for auction by the bank and hardly anyone knew about it. The starting bid was surprisingly reasonable considering the size and location. I did the math between my savings, a small business loan, and liquidating some investments I could actually afford it. It was a risk, but Karen had pushed me too far. I attended the auction the following Thursday, my heart pounding as I placed my bids. Only 2 other parties showed interest, a storage company and a small developer. When the auctioneer's gavel finally fell, I was the proud owner of 3 acres of prime parking real estate. The irony wasn't lost on me that Karen's crusade against my for cars had led to me owning spaces for over 200. I kept the purchase quiet while my lawyer handled the paperwork. The deed transfer took 2 weeks, during which Karen continued her harassment campaign. She convinced the board to pass her new 2-car maximum rule, giving current owners 30 days to comply or face daily fines of $100 per excess vehicle. She hand-delivered my notice with a smile that would have made the Grinch proud. The Monday after the sale finalized, I arrived at the parking lot at 5 a.m. with a contractor crew. By 7 we'd installed new signs at every entrance. Private property, no HOA parking. Violators will be towed at owner's expense. Monthly permits available. My phone started ringing by 7:30. Karen's call came at exactly 8 o'clock. What is the meaning of this? She screeched, abandoning all pretense of civility. You can't just close off community parking. That lot has been used by residents for years. I let her rant for a full minute before responding calmly, actually, Karen, I can do exactly that. I own the lot now. It's private property and I decide who parks there. The silence on the other end was so complete I thought she'd hung up. Then came a sound I'd never heard from Karen before, sputtering incoherence. You can't, that's impossible. The HOA needs that parking for events, the monthly board meetings, the summer barbecue. I guess you'll have to find alternative arrangements. I said, of course, I am offering monthly permits, $50 for regular residents, board members, though. Well, that's a special rate of $500 monthly. Supply and demand. The community impact was immediate and dramatic. The next HOA board meeting had to be canceled due to lack of parking. Residents who'd grown dependent on the overflow lot for their guests found themselves scrambling. Property showings became complicated when real estate agents couldn't find parking. The dominoes kept falling, and every single one traced back to Karen's anti-car crusade. At the emergency board meeting 2 weeks later, held at the elementary school a mile away because it had adequate parking, the atmosphere was hostile. Residents who'd previously stayed silent about Karen's overreach finally found their voices. This is your fault, Karen, shouted Miranda Chen, whose daughter's graduation party had been a parking nightmare. You had to go after Jim's cars, and now look where we are. Tom Bradley, whose elderly parents struggled with the long walk from street parking, was even more direct. I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in our current HOA president. Her personal vendetta has directly harmed our community. The motion was seconded by 5 different people simultaneously. Karen tried to maintain control, banging her gavel repeatedly. Order, this is not on the agenda. We're here to discuss forcing Mr. Johnson to provide community parking access. But the crowd had turned years of accumulated frustration with her petty rules and power trip spoiled over. Force him, laughed Robert Martinez. With what authority? He owns that lot. Fair and square. You created this mess, Karen, you fix it. The vote proceeded. Despite Karen's protests, when the ballots were counted, the result was overwhelming: 47 votes for her removal, 3 against. As the results were announced, Karen's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on an alarming purple. This is illegal, she shrieked. I'll sue every one of you. You can't do this to me. I've given 8 years of my life to maintaining standards in this community, and in 8 years you've made enemies of everyone here, replied Patricia Wong, the newly elected interim president. Your resignation from the board is effective immediately. Please turn in all HOA property, including keys and documents, by tomorrow at 5 p.m. Karen stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish, gasping for air. The realization that She'd lost everything: her power, her position, her ability to terrorize neighbors over petty infractions hit her. All at once she grabbed her purse and fled the auditorium, her sensible pumps clicking frantically against the linoleum as 47 of her former subjects watched in satisfaction. The final insult came the next week when she received a certified letter from the new HOA board due to her actions, leading directly to the loss of community parking, resulting in decreased property values and canceled events. The HOA was pursuing legal action to recover damages. The estimated figure, $75,000. Karen's scream of rage could be heard. 3 houses